Well, that totally sucks. It's like the 5th time, I think. Shit. Windows open, it rained. The hatches are open too. This is gonna be a mess.
Well, I'm back, and as you can see, I left the tarp up. It's about 87 degrees out, and it's windy. So while I'm recording this, you're probably gonna see the tent kind of balloon up here a little bit. But the reason why I'm leaving it on is I'm gonna prime the rest of the deck today, hopefully get a coat of paint on it, and I don't want anything falling into it while it's wet. So we'll leave the tarp up. Oh, there it goes. The sooner I can get the deck painted and done, the sooner I can take the tarp down. I don't have to worry about the weather screwing up my my work. Now, before I do that, a couple things. First, again, one of the problems you run into when you go to a general big box store, and I should have done my homework before I did, but like I had said before in a previous video, I'm going to be using Rust-Oleum on the deck. I'm probably going to spring for 1 part polyurethane for the hull. And the primer I was given was latex, and I'm using an alkyd oil-based product from Rust-Oleum for the paint. Now what I've read is, that latex underneath oil, it's not catastrophic, but it's not the best because they shrink at different rates when it gets cold. I just want to keep things consistent. So, and I should have reread a portion of Don Casey's book about deck refinishing. There we go. 6 vinegar flying. Before I went ahead and bought the primer, because he recommends an epoxy high fill primer. I don't want to spend the money for an epoxy at this point, so I got an oil-based high build triple thick primer. It's the Zinsser product, and it's made by Rust-Oleum, so for all intents and purposes, it's a Rust-Oleum product. I'll be using that instead of this on everything else, and I'm going to sand down what I did on the cabin top last week. So a little bit of additional work, but I think it's going to be worth it. Now, a couple other things. First, this area over here outlined by my drill holes is wet. Wet, 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 wet. So I'm going to do some surgery there. I'm going to cut it out and be able to show you the entire process this time. My footage got screwed up on what I did over here. But I'll do it again there, and brought some plywood with me that I'll be applying penetrating epoxy to. While that's setting, I will start sanding down the top of the cabin here and applying the additional primer. Now, I want to check this out and see how it came out. This was a delaminated issue, and I drilled holes very shallow in the top of the deck and just injected some epoxy in there between the core and the deck. Hopefully that'll stop the cracking, and it's hopefully there are no voids, so that water can't get into there in the future and rot out the core. So let's have a look and see how it turned out. All right. Looks pretty solid. The only issue here is that I may not have gone far enough this way, because I did hear a little bit of a crack, slight depression, but at this point I think it'll do. I want to get the boat in the water, and so I'll be filling these holes with thickened epoxy before I paint over that. All right.
It's been 24 hours, and my countersunk epoxy holes have cured fairly nicely. Let me show you what they look like. My phone doesn't fall out. Famous last words. All right, so as you can see, sometimes there may be a little air pocket there. So what I'm gonna do is just fill that in with maybe some super glue or Gorilla Glue or something like that. Otherwise, they look nice. The area where I had the most issue with air pockets is here. Now this doesn't concern me as much. I will fill that in with super glue, just because I don't think I'll be able to inject epoxy into that. It's too small. But I'm not screwing from the top down, I'm screwing from the bottom up. So this is going to be surrounded with butyl tape as well. So I'm not that concerned there. There's only 1 and 2, and the rest look pretty good. So that being done, I'm going to be prepping the cockpit area, the footwell especially, the rest of the cockpit area I suppose, for final painting, which won't happen today. Today I'm going to put my second coat of non-skid on, and I don't want to rush the final painting of the cockpit. Cockpit is where you spend most of your time. I'm getting to the end of the project, and I don't want to cut any corners in this all-important area where, you know, this is where you experience most of the boat. Now, I want to show you something I'm really excited about. This is my excited face. That doesn't have anything to do with painting, but one of the things I was kind of concerned with, very concerned with, is the teak rail for this boat. I mean, 50 years old, and almost all the teak on this boat has been removed. Actually, all of the teak on the boat has been removed and sand, oiled, sealed with epoxy, and then varnished. And once you get the weathered layer off, it looks good as new. That's the wonderful thing about teak. It lasts forever. The problem with the tow rail is that it's been sanded one too many times. There are too many splits and cracks for me to repair. And even if I did and put it back on, I've got screw heads that have been sanded flat and are exposed, poking out through the top of the cap rail and the tow rail. So this really bothered me. I didn't know what I was going to do. I actually considered getting some select pine from Home Depot, cutting that up and replacing the teak with that, sealing it, you know, with an epoxy layer, and then staining, sealing, and then varnishing. My wife convinced me, no, that's not a good idea. It's going to look really cheesy. I had to agree. I thought, well, I'll just fix the teak tow rail. The more I looked at it, the more I was like, how am I going to do this? And I thought, well, I'm just going to have to bite the bullet and buy new teak, which is a huge expense to justify for, you know, a boat that I didn't pay. You know, I paid $1,600 for. It's 50 years old. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it. So I went on a website for a local lumberyard here, and it turns out they were getting rid of their composite decking called Trex, which is, it's not new teak or plastic, but I mean it's composite wood. They were getting rid of their scratched, indented supply for $1 a linear foot, which is a fraction of the cost, the real cost. If I completely replace the tow rail with standard plastic or new teak, it probably, if it didn't equal the cost of just buying teak, it would become pretty close. So I went and looked. They had a color I think matches pretty close to where my teak is in terms of age and weathering. This is what I came up with. Now we're under the tarp, so it's going to be a little difficult for you to see. You know, go outside and shoot an alternate video. This is Havana Gold. I bought 68 feet of it. It's 1 by 6, right down the middle. that'll give me plenty for the tail rail, and the color I think is going to work just fine. So I'm very okay. I have half of the deck painted with the first coat of oil-based Rust-Oleum. So come on, see what it looks like first time around. Go ahead and so you can see in areas further up here especially, the non-skid comes poking through, which is okay because I'm going to be putting a different color, a very light gray non-skid right there, and it's going to cover that. So I'm not too concerned about that. This I am concerned about. I stepped in water here as soon as I got on the boat. I'm not sure if it came from in the holes or if it was freestanding on the deck. The tarp is pretty good at keeping the deck dry, but it is getting torn up and there are holes in it. So this is temporary because I want to get the boat in the water. I don't want it to be sitting here in August while I am repairing the deck. As you saw in previous videos, I put in, squirted in, inserted penetrating epoxy that I got from Total Boat. I did that a couple of times. I painted over it. It's solid, but it doesn't give me the same whack as I get on healthy sides of the deck. So I'm not sure what to make of that. Over the winter time, I will cut this piece out, put some plywood in there and do it right, and we'll see exactly what the penetrating epoxy did. It'll be a job because I'm going to have to sand all of that out on top of the, or underneath the fiberglass skin. Now what I'm going to use today, to fill those holes and seal them is this stuff. Edit makes it. Yeah, it's not cheap. $42 for this little tube. But I'll be filling all those holes with this. Let's put here. Want to zoom in on that?
I already did.
Okay. Flexible structural repair epoxy. We'll see what it does. I'll be using this on that side and on the starboard side, and then I'll start in with the non-skid, which I bought some additive for, and I'm going to be using Rust-Oleum again for that. So I'm fairly pleased with the finish I'm getting on the Rust-Oleum. This is a couple of weeks old now, so the enamel is beginning to harden. We'll see how it holds up over the season. So most of what I've been recording has happened down on the boat at the marina, and I really haven't shown or recorded anything having to do with what I'm doing with the bright work, the trim, or any of the accessory projects associated with the boat. So I'm going to show you a failure I've had, a screw up that I'm going to have to fix. This is the rear hatch, the stern hatch, leading down to the storage space underneath the lazarettes. And one thing I didn't know until I started sanding was that this top portion here is a veneer. And this is how I learned about that when I started poking through with the sander. And what happened is there's very little area for any epoxy to soak up, and that's what I was using, was the penetrating epoxy. And it began to crater. So yeah, if you look at the light, we got one there. It's like I say, it's chicken pox. A few more here. These are craters that were filled with varnish that scabbed over. So yeah, it looks like shit, and I need to fix it. So I'm going to be, the other thing I did was I thought, well, I'll just fix this as varnish, and I didn't do my homework on how to apply varnish, and I treated it like epoxy and just dumped a bunch on, thinking that all I have to do is fill this stuff and it'll be taken care of, and this is what happened. Started to get this wrinkling effect here. Okay, so the varnish has to come off, and the underlying epoxy has to be lightly sanded, and then I'm going to use this bar top glaze coat and try again. Now, I'm not going to be able to do any filming on any of the action associated with this. I don't have a GoPro, which I need to get. My cameraman is at football practice right now. So I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done, but I'm going to be using my Orbital sander, 40 grit sandpaper, the materials I just showed you. So when it's done and it cures and it dries, I'll show you how it turned out. Okay, so we're down at the marina a little bit later in the day than I wanted it to be, but it's a good day for painting. The sun's not out. Winds are light, variable. So I have my partner here who's done with football practice, at least for now, vacuuming off any remaining dust from yesterday. Now while he's doing that, I need to do something about this. So we've got some gouges here that were there when I bought the boat, and I'll be putting some filler in it. So this portion is not going to get painted today, just this area here. And this is what I'm going to use. Stuff I showed you in the last video. Pettit Flex Epoxy. Now the directions for this stuff on how to use it are not on the bottle, they are online. I actually caught a YouTube video on how to do this. So you're gonna need, it's nasty shit. This is. I'm in a well ventilated area, so I'm not gonna be using a gas mask, but I will have gloves on. And you need to use a pallet because this stuff comes out in 2 liquids, and now there's a nozzle you can attach here, but the marina's closed today, so I don't think I saw it on the shelf anyway. So I'll be doing my own mixing, and on the pallet here I'll be using Home Depot paint stick to apply it, and I've got to get my gloves. Okay, so this is a twist off, that's a pull out, and that's what see how they're separate, those 2 liquids. So I got my gloves on because if this gets on your skin, not good. Okay, disease control gets called, emergency room. Ew, ow. Whoops. I need a gun for that. All right. Hey. Okay. Yeah. So I just use this to push the base in there. Comes out in 2 colors. You're supposed to mix it until they're clear. Now this only has a hot life of about 20 minutes. I'm guessing much shorter than that, the hotter it is. Pretty mild today, so of course you want to mix it up in small batches so you don't waste any of it. And off we go. Alright, let's put this stuff in. Okay. So, big spot is here, here, and here. Stand it over. Now all of this can be sanded as well, so I'm not that concerned about over application at this point. We got a portion down there as well. Apologize for the unsteadiness of the camera. I'm working under very amateur conditions here. Need a GoPro. Oops. So there is a part of the deck that I kind of caused some damage to when I pulled out a stanchion, and I initially filled that with some Bondo. I know I should be burned at the stake for that, and I'm gonna have to take that out, do it over again, and I'm gonna use this. You can't screw anything in the Bondo. The cool thing about this is not only can it be sanded and you can screw stuff into it, but there's 35% flexibility to it, which is great for cleats, hardware, anything bearing a load. Okay. I think that will suffice for now. 3 hours cure time, and looks like a bunch of Vaseline, huh? Got a little bit left here. Might as well use it all. Here, use a little bit. And here. What happened? Okay. Smooth it out a little bit. Okay, so we're going to take care of the rest of the hull. Sans this part. And when we're done, we should be able to sand and be ready to paint that portion tomorrow. Okay, so 24 hours later, and let's look and see what that filler did. So, yeah, it's all hard to the touch. I'm going to be sanding this down, faired, so that I can get paint on that. Okay, not bad. In my garage today, as you can see behind me, it is July 1st, and my initial goal was to have the boat in the water by Memorial Day. Spring weather, put the box on that, and then my next goal was well by the 4th of July. Getting close. I don't think, because I work during June, so June wasn't going to be a heavy boating month for me anyway. I'm getting close, but I'm probably not going to have it in until this Friday, so a few days after, which will give me 2 solid months in the water, and then maybe 6 weeks after that, weather depending, where I can do some sailing on the weekends. Next year, you know, all the big projects will be finished, so I can drop the boat in the water as soon as the weather gets nice, and I won't have to worry about this. But I do want it in the water. Projects are getting a little bit tiresome at this point. Now, one of the problems I'm having is I still have this tarp on. It's 90 plus degrees out this entire week. That tarp is a freaking oven. The reason I have it on primarily is to protect the deck paint, but also because all of my hatch covers and lazarette covers have been removed, which means I need to put them back on. Now, this is what I was dealing with. This is what the hatch covers look like when I remove them from the boat. This is fiberglass. I'm just going to glass this in. Which is okay, you know. Probably protected the wood quite a long time. It is a 50-year-old boat, okay, but that needs to be removed and the bottom sanded, which I did with this. And I thought, well, this will be easy. All I have to do is stain the top, and I can, you know, use a paint roller, roll some thinned out epoxy on top of it to protect it, and do some varnishing, or that would be the end of it. This is, however, is a veneer. You can see here, I learned that because I ended up sanding right through it. So, the new plan is to just use some cheap underlayment from Home Depot with a nice grain pattern and cut out essentially what's going to be a new veneer, only 1/4 of an inch thick. Glue it onto the top and either use teak oil with it or stain, and then epoxy that to protect the wood, and then varnish over that. Should look nice. So that's what we're going to be doing today. If I have any time left, I will start on the tow rail. Quick update here. I've tried to seal my teak in epoxy and then varnish over that with mixed results. Smaller pieces of wood are easier, and in my research I've read if there's oils left over in the wood that it's going to cause pockmarks or fish eyes to form on the wood when you're trying to seal it with either a penetrating epoxy or with like a glazed coating. And well, here, I'll just show you. This is my combing board, and you can see here, okay, we've got a pretty good seal there. Now, I've hit the entire board with 120 grit to take care of, because I had a lot of fish marks, or fish eyes, pardon. See? Yeah, right there. Now, that was all over the board. So I've hit it with 120, trying to go as far down as I can without hitting the wood. Too deep there. That's raised, I'm not worried about that. A cleat goes there. A little bit deep here, hitting some wood. And finally up here. For the most part, I wanted to leave the epoxy coating on and get down as thin as possible without going through the epoxy so I can apply another coat. Now, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to thin it out. And I've seen that on I think it was a Jamestown video. I'm going to revisit that video and see, figure out what the mixture is, and then hit it again. And I'll also be applying the same technique to my lazarette seat covers here, which are just underlayment, plywood underlayment. This is faux wood, or plastic wood, that's stained okay, I guess. I was able to find some teak wood putty, local hardware stores. I want to try that too, see if that doesn't fill it any better than that. But I will be coating these with a thinned out version of epoxy and then varnishing to try to preserve them as best as possible. Okay, so what I'm doing here is I'm getting the old sealant off of the frame for the windows. It's going to rain in a couple of days, which means I need to get the windows back in, the port lights, and in order to do that, I need to rebed the windows, which means new sealant. It's important to get, all of this has to come off. It has to be like so that you can eat off of it. Because what happens is the old sealant will, if it's still on there, will bond with the new sealant instead of the new sealant bonding with the material that you needed to adhere to create a watertight seal. So what I was doing before was heating this up with a heat gun or a propane torch, which worked well, except it made the frame hot, and I would have to let it cool, and it would slow down my progress. So I decided to just heat up my actual scraper. And you still have to put a little bit of effort into it, but it does make it easier. With relative ease. Now there's a thin film of adhesive still on there, which I'll get off with Goo Off.